all of Europe. Both Latvia and Finland have kept investing in security and defense. We need to send a strong message that all of Europe takes its defense and security seriously. The threat from Putin's Russia will not diminish even when Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine ends. As Edgars mentioned, our countries have strong defense material and defense industry cooperation that can be further deepened. The CAVS program of Patria was mentioned as a good example, and again we see the spillover effect with over 40 Latvian paid Patria vehicles going over to Ukraine. And I'm sure that we'll work on other similar projects. In many ways, I would argue, finally, that Finland and Latvia are leading the way, building Europe to be a coherent and capable geopolitical actor. The bonds of Finland and Latvia have forged in the decades will ensure that together we're prepared for whatever lies ahead. And I just want to finish by the fact that we right now live in very uncertain times, and we have to, as societies, have the capacity to deal with uncertainty. There are things coming at us day in and day out which we're not used to, certainly not since the end of the Cold War. And I think resilience is the key, and our capacity to act to the unknown together. And I think in the past few years we've shown that it works. I think one of the first people that I always reach out to if something happens is in Finland is the President of Latvia, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that in the future as well. Thank you very much. Paldies.
Paldies.
Thank you. Now we'll open the floor for questions. Edgars Rinkevics, please.
Latvia, question for President Stubb. You have developed a close relationship with President Trump. If you have discussed regional security, may I ask what is your impression about President Trump's commitment to defend the Baltic states from possible Russian aggression? Thank you.
I think the United States is very committed to security in northeastern Europe. We have seen President Trump on numerous occasions pushing all of us to increase our defense expenditure from 2% to 5%. A country like Finland has a defense cooperation agreement with the United States. We are a new ally. And I think the American administration sees the Nordic states and Baltic states as an entity for its own security posture. For all that I hear and see in the conversations with our American friends in NATO and elsewhere is that European security is of utmost importance for the current US administration.
Paldies, thank you. Ms.
Hello, Anniina Karpala from the Finnish news agency. My question is for both presidents. Do you think the airspace violations by the Russian drones will continue, and what kind of threat do they pose for EU and NATO countries, Finland and Latvia specifically? Also, do you see a connection between the airspace violations and the ongoing Japad military exercise?
Well, I think what we have seen since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine, and especially in the last 2 or so years, that there have been violations of Romanian airspace, Polish airspace, Lithuanian airspace, and also Latvian airspace. We had an accident a year ago that most probably was a drone that veered off the course, flew over the Belarus and crashed in Latvia. What happened last week is something that I would say, for me, is very difficult to believe was accidental. If you have 19 plus drones flying into Poland, then, as we discussed actually with President, there can be a couple of explanations: intentional, incompetence, or both. And all of three options are scary, frankly. So from that point of view, I do believe, and I here agree with Alex, that the decision by NATO to put Eastern Sentry, the decision of NATO to increase air defense capabilities of the eastern flank is appropriate and right response. However, what we need to learn from this situation is that, and at this point, anti-drone defense systems in NATO countries still need to be developed. Normally, you don't use very expensive air defense missiles to shoot down rather cheap drones. That's where probably lesson number one should be drawn. Number two, whether that's connected with Zapad exercise. Well, what we see about Zapad exercise that formally ends today, if I'm not mistaken, is that it's not as large-scale exercise as some people were expecting, probably because of ongoing military operations by the Russian troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine is to some extent saving us again from more Russian troop presence in Belarus or near our borders. I wouldn't speculate currently whether that incursion was related with Zapad or not, but I would take this seriously, and I think that NATO takes that seriously. We had Article 4 consultations last week. Some decisions are made, but we can't rule out, and that is something that I've said also last week, that such kind of accidents may repeat. The best response would be prepare. I think it was very good response by the Polish Air Force to shoot them down, to show that we take all the measures appropriate, but we have certain lessons to be drawn.
Yeah, I come back to the point that we have to expect the unexpected, and that means that Russia is going to continue to test the West in one form or another. And as Edgars mentioned, there are three possibilities in these kinds of cases. One is malintent, the second one is incompetence, and the worst one is a combination of malintent and incompetence. And then we just have to ask ourselves, what do we do? Well, in the case of undersea cables, we established a deterrence in the form of the Baltic Sentry, and it seems to have worked, at least so far. And in terms of the drones flying into Polish airspace, over 19 of them over the span of 7 hours, as President Rinkevičs noted, it is very unlikely that that was a mistake. We established first Article 4 consultation procedures, which I think was the 8th time in the history of the alliance that this took place. And then secondly, Secure and the Secretary General of NATO decided to establish a Baltic Sentry. And in many ways, we live in volatile times, and it's important that the alliance understands the new dynamics of modern warfare. The line between war and peace has been blurred, and we'll end up seeing these types of tests in the future. We're very happy that the Eastern Sentry now begins in Polish airspace. We take lessons learned from there and then expand it all the way up to the high north, finding, as was noted, a good balance between the types of air defense that we use for the types of threats that might exist. I don't want to speculate whether this particular drone incident was linked to Zapad or not. We have been observing the Zapad exercise coming from Belarus and Russia, and we see no major abnormalities in that military exercise so far.
Thank you. And Mr. Rutinen, please, the floor is yours. Mr. Rutinen.
Jyri Huttunen, Ilta-Sanomat. The President Trump said on weekend that new tougher American sanctions require all the NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil, and he required also tariffs on China. As the sanctions have been postponed continuously, do you consider this sign of new sanctions, or is this a new way to postpone sanctions once again?
Well, President Trump had a phone conversation with European leaders a week and a half ago on Thursday in Paris. It was a very fruitful conversation, and the two elements that he put forward, the first one was linked to some European countries buying oil and gas, and I fully agree with him that that should stop, and it should stop immediately. And of course there are two countries in particular inside the European Union that we refer to in this case, and they are Slovakia and Hungary. As far as sanctions and tariffs are concerned, I have never seen the European Union more united or more effective in rolling out numerous sanctions packages. The latest one is the 19th sanction package, which the European Commission and its member states are working on right now. So we continue to work on gaining the economic cost or increasing the economic cost of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And as I have said before, there are many things that China could do in making sure that Russia would not be capable to continue its war. And in that sense, I believe that President Trump and the US administration is on the right side.
Just very quickly to add, I very much agree that we must stop buying Russian oil and gas. This country, some 10 years ago, was 100% dependent on Russian oil and gas. And we made a decision when the full-scale aggression started to stop buying those resources. We survived, and I think that everyone in Europe can do that, and that would be appropriate decision made. When it comes to other sanctions, I think that what we in the European Union are lacking is the secondary sanction mechanism. Because one thing is that we stop buying something from Russia or selling to Russia, we put sanctions on, but then at the end of the day, there are a lot of examples of circumventing those sanctions, and the European sanction mechanism, while I very much applaud all the 18 packages, and probably very soon we are going to see the 19th sanction package are being put on, we still have a lot of ways how those sanctions are circumvented. And in that case, the establishment of such kind of secondary sanction mechanism would be probably very efficient. When it comes to the proposal from President Trump that NATO allies stop buying Russian oil and gas, I think that this is the right approach. When it comes to the tariffs, I think that this is also the issue that probably needs to be discussed between European, American leaders, and to find ways how we can actually advance in making such kind of policies more efficient.
I could perhaps just add one thing, that I think the issue of frozen assets is key here. The 300 billion euros that have been frozen, and I think with the right measures of burden sharing in Europe, those should be released in one way or another to benefit Ukraine, whether it's reconstruction or other things at the moment. So there are many ways in which to put increased economic pressure on Russia, and using the frozen assets would be one.
And that is where our positions are very, very aligned. I think we are like-minded on this issue completely.
Thank you. This concludes our press conference. Thank you all.